Welcome to the Game Corner, another video game podcast. My name is Harrison. You might know me as Ixen on the internet. I'm very sick, but I am joined by
Rowan. I apparently, before I introduce myself a lot, I've been told.
And this is Sheldon. You also know me as Captain Unova.
Who's also sick. So if we have any coughing fits or sniffling like that, I'm going to try and edit it out. Don't hold your breath for that, though. And yeah, I was going to comment, like, you didn't start with, Rowan. Anywho, how y'all doing?
Not too bad. I've been actually enjoying my little VGC break, but almost got my first bit of the Malamar stuff put together. It's been kind of fun to do some video editing again.
Ooh, I'm looking forward to that. You, Sheldon?
I'm doing all right. Had this cough and stuff going on. Other than that, though, pretty good.
Nothing
too crazy.
I also see that Rowan got a new toy.
Did I?
It's right in front of your face.
Oh, the mic. yeah. The sound quality might be slightly less garbage going forward.
It looks and sounds so familiar to mine.
Wait, are you supposed to keep that foam thing on top? I thought
that is what I said. Right, I said that right before we started recording. Yeah, it's your like wind filter, pop filter type thing.
Yeah, it's like a pop filter.
Yeah, you're supposed to have it on technically.
Interesting.
I guess you don't have to have it on, but it does help.
Can you still hear me? Oh wow. Okay.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Have you not? Anyway, I have looked the same in our recordings every episode.
Why?
And every stream.
Why is it even an option then? Why can't I take it off?
Because it can get disgusting. You might want to replace it at some point.
Oh, yeah.
Like mine is probably full of spit, if I'm being honest.
You should try not spitting on your mic.
Anyway. That's staying in the recording. Anywho. Y'all, we set out on a journey long ago to do a Back to Basics series. And I think we should jump right into it this time. What are we talking about today, Rowan?
We're talking about team building. So last week was a lot of rote memorization, a lot of just information you need to know about the basics of the game. Team building is a lot more free form. It's a lot more creative. It's where you get to express yourself. So it's going to be a lot of just random info thrown at you, honestly, and like some of it will be applicable, some of it won't be, but it's all just kind of like the stuff you want to keep in mind when you're choosing the 6 Pokemon to go on your team.
Definitely. It's the fun part sometimes.
I gotta be honest, I suck at team building.
I'm bad at it too. I mean, so this is an interesting thing about it, right? Is like you can say like the game is half building and half playing, but you can very easily just take someone else's team that they built and do really well with it. There are so many players who take someone else's team to a regional or a national and just top cut, like or win even, right?
I've definitely found that I'm better at piloting teams than building teams.
They're two different skills. Like,
sure,
you want to think it's all part of the same player, but I don't think team building is necessarily a needed skill to be a successful player. But I think if you're not a good team builder, though, you kind of want to have a group around you that can help with that. You know, you don't want to. If you're just on your own, you need to be able to build too.
Which,
yeah, exactly.
Which does kind of lend itself to what we're trying to build here with the Game Corner, is a group of people upon which you can steal ideas from. That's what I'm using it for. I mean, working together to build teams. That's what I meant.
Just an elaborate ruse to steal our rental codes.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, but that's the fun part, right? Like yes, VGC I think has a big community aspect, and this is a big part of it too. Being able to work with other people, build teams, learn from each other, try different things, and steal ideas.
Yeah, that's actually a really cool thing that was added when Sword and Shield with the rental codes, is where you were literally able to just take someone else's team wholesale and just use it directly. And that's what's kind of new. You kind of, in the past, you did really have to like build everything from scratch, and it was harder to build things from scratch back then too. So yeah, no, it's the game's definitely moving towards where you don't have to do this, but I think that if you build your team, you'll at least have a better idea of how to pilot it, whereas you'll be starting from zero if you're taking someone else's. you absolutely can learn to pilot it just as well or better than them. Like Rinya Sun is a really good example as a team that came up with a guy named Rinya, and they brought it to Worlds and they did really well with it. But some people did better than them with the team named after them. So
he lost to a mirror match at Worlds, which like it's still impressive to get that far, but like that's rough.
It's got to sting a little bit.
Yeah.
Amusingly, I think they actually said that they thought that team was bad. Like they used it to win a tournament and then immediately stopped using it. Like they only started playing again for Worlds. Where like there's just so they were. I think the exact quote, or like paraphrasing, so not exact quote, was like this isn't a good team. There's just so many good players using it that you're making it good by force. Yeah, but you.
I would say though, with the whole rental code thing though, if you are a brand new to VGC player, it is a godsend. Because building a team from nothing and little experience in VGC, it's difficult. It's a hard task and it's very difficult.
Do we have confirmation that it's coming back in Scarlet and Violet rental teams?
I don't think confirmation, but I think it's almost a sure thing. We're getting ranked ladder,
I have to imagine it would be. Yeah,
I want to say it was on the official site. I'd have to double check, but.
Okay, don't quote us on that, but it's probably coming back.
But yeah, that's one of the best things. That way, most people will have sometimes a team report, or explain what's going on with the team. They can, or you can even, ask somebody a question. Most people in the community is nice enough anyway that you could just, hey, what's the reason for this speed or whatever. But the rental team will really help out a lot when you're first starting. And then you can kind of get the concepts from there that we'll talk about in this.
Yeah, I think you really hit the nail on the head with like how difficult it is as a brand new player to just make a functional team from scratch, because you have no idea what's actually good and isn't, and what things are good only in certain contexts. And like to be just upfront, like everyone's first instinct when they get into this is they have like the Pokemon they played through the story with, or just their favorites, and they're like, I want to use this. And I was like, well, I hope your favorite Pokemon is Incineroar, because like, if you want to make if you caught a Boltund early on in Sword and Shield, like that's great. That's a very cute electric dog. I'm sure you beat the Elite Four, but time to put it in the box. Like,
yep.
which is hard. It kind of sucks. And once you get better, you can find little niche uses for your favorites. I'm sure you can, like Boltund gets competitive. I'm sure you could do something with it. But for the most part, it's when you're starting out, I think it's best to stick to the things that are tried and true, like the things that are being used the most. And then as you get better, as you get more comfortable, you learn what things do. You can start trying to find teams where your favorites will work.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. So shall we jump into some team building concepts?
Absolutely.
Let's do it.
So there's a whole bunch of ways to when you are building a team, you obviously have to start somewhere, right? And I think it's really hard, because I think there's a lot of different like places to start with it, and then a lot of ways to round it out. I kind of want to start with just like back to basics, the typings. I don't personally start here when I build my own teams. I usually use typings to round things out as opposed to starting them, but I think it's a reasonable place. Like we were talking about last week, how there's 18 types. They're all arranged in a chart that show which ones they're weak and strong against, and you'll find quickly that you want a balanced team, a team where the types complement each other, where they can cover each other's weaknesses. There's a concept of switching in Pokemon where you will, before the turn even happens, you can swap out your Pokemon for another one in exchange for not getting to move that turn. And if you are able to do that effectively, you can make it so your opponent's move doesn't do very much if you predict where they're attacking. If you are about to be hit by a water type attack on your fire type and you put a grass type there, then you won't take very much damage, and then you have a grass type there to deal with their water type the next turn. And having those options every turn is really helpful, and it's a pretty solid place to start.
So looking at different types is a good thing to do. I'm with you though, Rowan. Whenever I rarely go and build teams, I'm going to use typing to sort of, like you said, round it out at the end. I like to start generally with and this is a good concept to go into, is cores. Right. Yeah. So a lot of the times on many teams, you'll have every team has most teams, whatever, has the concept of a core, which is 2 to 3 Pokemon that really complement each other in one way or another. Looking at either they might have complementary types. So like Fire, Water, Grass core is a very basic one that you can think of, where you have 3 Pokemon of each of those types that kind of cover each other's weaknesses. You might have other things like you've heard us talk about like weather, so sun or rain or sandstorm or hail, and Pokemon that thrive in those weather conditions, and Pokemon that can set those weather conditions. What are some other ones?
I mean the other big typing core is what they call the fantasy core. It's Steel, Dragon, Fairy.
Yep.
I mean, the reason we mention Fire, Water, Grass is like so often, it's partially because everybody knows that as the basic rock, paper, scissors, but it's also just one of the most effective cores where each of them cover each other's weaknesses extremely well, both defensively and offensively. So anytime one of their weaknesses is on the field, you are able to pivot into one of the others that can cover those weaknesses. And there's a lot of lesser ones too. I think Flying, Ground, Electric is another one where they cover each other's weaknesses actually pretty well. So yeah, you can find all kinds of things like that in the game where it's not necessarily even typing, like you said, weather. You have a lot of abilities that complement the weather and another ability that sets it, so you can consider those a core together.
Yep. And then as we'll kind of touch on the metagame later too, but as the series or the season, whatever, matures, you'll have different meta cores, different teams that kind of come out that are just, people have proven that these mon work well together. So you can start with one of those and just build around that, or even back to rentals, just take a rental team and see how that core plays before starting your own team building with it.
Yeah, sometimes those cores actually don't complement each other well, typing wise. I think a really good example is Tornadus and Kyogre. It's the big go-to for restricted metas. The idea is that Kyogre does insane amounts of damage when its health is high, but it's not that fast. And Tornadus has access to a move called Tailwind that doubles your speed, and it can do it before anybody else moves with its ability. So you have these two Pokemon where if you get to use them together, you can just set up insane amounts of damage that happens before your opponent can do anything. But they're both weak to electric, and they're both special types. Like in theory, they don't actually complement each other all that well, but something about them works really well together. And that's like when we say core, it's not always the like defensive switching typing kind. You can start off your team building with anything like that. It's an offensive
core.
Yeah.
Is what that, and also, like Tornadus gets Hurricane, which is 100% in rain.
Yes.
So it's synergies more than anything with those two.
Yep. And I was going to...
The strongest cores will often have both. I think the biggest example of that is Torkoal and Venusaur, where Torkoal sets the sun and Venusaur can move twice as fast with it, but those are also fire and grass, so you have to respect them already.
And you got to respect both of them.
Yep. They're both very strong. Yeah,
and I was
this is where I start. This is where I start my team building. It's like I will usually choose. It can be a defensive core like Fire, Water, Grass, but it's usually just I want 2 or 3 Pokemon that work really well together. I want them to be able to do as like a lot together, and then the rest of the team is to round out their weaknesses, because they have to have weaknesses if the game is well balanced. And sometimes it's not, but they usually have at least 1 or 2 things that they need covered.
Yep. And I was gonna add, so like the cores tend to be 2 to 4 Pokemon, kind of 4 be very large. That still leaves the other spots on your team that you have to fill. So you're gonna have Pokemon that I was actually gonna kind of throw Tornadus, Grimmsnarl, and like Whimsicott, and even Incineroar in this group of like support Pokemon, where they do something that might not be entirely part of the core itself, but support whatever team they're on, right? So Grimmsnarl, Tornadus, and Whimsicott all have Prankster, which allows them to do status and like support moves at a higher priority, so they can move faster, which is a great way to set up different things to support the more offensive Pokemon like Kyogre in that last example.
I think that's a really good thing to keep in mind also, is balancing the roles that your Pokemon play, right? you have things like Kyogre that just blast away and do a ton of damage. But if your whole team is made up of Kyogres, you're going to lose. I mean, even if they weren't all water type, right?
And like if they bring one Gastrodon, the game's over. You know.
Yeah, yeah. Even if they all cover the different types, like if all your team has is things that blast things without any kind of support, you're going to want something to enable it. Like otherwise, your opponent who does have a balanced team will find a way around it. Like, okay, you attack real hard, but I'll just put you to sleep, or I'll just paralyze you, or I'll redirect your attacks away, or any number of different ways to handle that. And you want your own ways to, in turn, deal with their counters.
It's always the rock, paper, scissors aspect of the game.
Exactly.
Which we always have that, because there's always going to be a counter to whatever's strong. There's something that counters that.
Yep.
And this is where I think the beautiful part of how the game happens in terms of adaptation is like we have what's called a meta game, the game within a game, most effective tactic available, whatever you want to define that as. It's what everybody else is playing, and you start dealing with that starts in the team builder. So, okay, everyone's playing Tornadus and Kyogre. Great. What do I do against that? You decide, okay, I can change their weather. I can set Trick Room to make their Tailwind work against them. I can do all kinds of things. But then all the Tornadus Kyogre players are going to start thinking, okay, I'm losing now because people are doing these things specifically to counter my strategy. How can I account for that? And this just goes back and forth over months and months, because end of the day, there's no mechanical skill in this game. So like it all comes down to just intelligent decisions. And those decisions happen before you press one button.
Yep. Last week we talked about turn 0. It's this team building is what happens before turn 0.
Turn -1. Yeah.
Right. we can't keep going backwards, y'all. But yeah, it's true though, right? So part of, and we kind of touch on this too, but part of building your team, or if you take a rental, being able to look at and understand how the team is built, gives you that insight to have a good turn 0 and then a good rest of your game, right? If you know how to play that team, which will come with time, right? So if you take a rental or you build a team, right, you have a lot of games with it, a lot of practice with it, that'll help, of course. But then you have just as you play more games, as you understand the meta game more and more, then you can grasp a lot of that stuff a lot faster and easier.
What are some of y'all's favorite, like, okay, I feel like there's so many like buckets that all of these concepts fall into. It's kind of hard to like cleanly organize them. So we've talked about cores both in terms of typing and in terms of just these things work well together. But there's also just like general strategies you might follow, which like the Pokemon don't necessarily work super well together by default, but like this is a strategy that I'm using them together with. So a really good example that was massive in Sword and Shield because of Dynamax was an item called Weakness Policy, where if you get hit by an attack that's super effective, you can double your offensive stats double, which, as you can imagine, is really, really strong. And so, I mean, it can be used to like punish your opponent for hitting you with a super effective attack, because then you just revenge kill them. But you can also do it to yourself. A really cool thing about VGC is that there's 2 Pokemon on the field, and you can even attack your own Pokemon. So there's strategies where you would hit yourself with a very weak, super effective attack, take not that much damage, and then proceed to mow over your opponent's team. This is a concept of, I keep using the word gimmick for it in my own speech, but I don't think that's really fair. It's just a strategy.
It's a strategy.
It's strategies, yeah. Especially because gimmick means something in Pokemon.
Yeah. Do y'all have like a favorite kind of set of strategies?
Well, mine would be what you're talking about. Colossal's always, I mean, that's the start of my competitive, playing.
You want to give them a lowdown on what Colossal does?
Yeah. So what Colossal does, it's a Gen 8 Pokemon, so its G-Max form is the big kicker for it. But its ability is the really thing that puts it over the top. So it's a rock and fire type Pokemon, and it has an ability called Steam Engine. So whenever it's hit by a water move or a fire move, its speed is maxed out. So it's +6 speed. So 4 times its speed. So, you're going to be faster than everything, pretty much, with that much speed. So it's just the whole concept of you're attacking first with that. So you get the Steam Engine proc, but also because you're going to hit it usually with a water move, you're going to get a Weakness Policy boost. So you're getting double your attack stats.
Yeah, it was a really cool thing that dominated the meta for a while until people started finding ways around it. But like Sheldon was saying there, it's a fire and rock type, which means that you want to hit it with a water type attack to both get that steam engine speed and to get your weakness policy boost. But that means you're taking 4 times damage from that water attack. So even the weakest of water attacks would hurt.
Yep.
Yes, it was, and that's I feel like how you were saying gimmick at first, but strategy, because it is a real risk.
Yep.
Risk reward.
I bet a lot of people considered that a gimmick when the game first came out, and it slowly just became stable and like a thing that people do. And that's it's kind of where like the line you draw between a gimmick and a strategy is hard to draw.
Yeah, I would almost call trick, like a trick eject button more gimmicky than.
You say that, but someone does that to you. A, you lost a game, so that's rough. B, you now have to be scared of that. What we're talking about is a strategy where so there's an item in the game called the eject button, and I think it was originally meant to be like used on Pokemon like that you didn't want to get. Yeah, you didn't want your Pokemon to die if it took a hit like a weak hit or something. So you could. It makes it so your Pokemon automatically switches out when you get hit. But there's also moves in the game that allow you to switch items with your opponent. So you could put this item onto your opponent's Dynamax Pokemon, hit them, and then they are forced to forfeit all their Dynamax turns.
Yep.
Which it's very infuriating to get hit by because you don't see it coming usually. At least that's the idea.
It's bad on the ladder. Like best of 1 is where it's scary.
I was gonna mention at some point best of 1 versus best of 3 and how this all plays together. Because in
time difference in team building.
Absolutely. When we're talking about like ladder climbing, right? So the rank ladder on cart, that's all best of 1. But if you're looking at like a in-person event, regionals, worlds, whatever, most of the time, 90% of the time, that's like best of 3, right? So you have the chance to actually learn how your opponent's team is built over a game or 2, and then hopefully you take the win on game 2 or game 3, right? And you learn if they have those strategies or gimmicks, whatever you want to call them, then you know what to look out for and how to play around that, hopefully, if your team's prepared.
If it's really strong, like trick eject button, where you just lose your whole Dynamax, you've already lost game 1, and that's still something you have to be terrified of. And what if they have 2 strategies like that on their team? They beat you with one game 1, beat you with the second one game 2. You might beat them 100 games after that, but it doesn't matter. You've already lost the set and you're out.
It's rough.
It's a really fine line to draw between gimmick and strategy. And I think that a lot of people at these big tournaments, they will pack a trick or 2 like this up their sleeve.
We've seen it. We've seen some wild stuff in tournaments, pop up. And sometimes they do well. Because no one expects it.
That was like not nearly as extreme as that, but like I packed the regional I did pretty well, and I brought a Thundurus, and that's a physical attacker. With a Kyogre. And so one of Kyogre's biggest counters is Gastrodon. It's a Pokemon that makes water type moves A, not work, and B, boost the Gastrodon's power. So very scary thing to deal with. And Thundurus it's a physical attacker. It doesn't have ways to really hit Gastrodon hard enough to kill it before it can do something, usually yawn and put you to sleep. But I put a special grass move on my Thundurus, completely useless in all circumstances except for against Gastrodon, where it gets a 4 times boost. So this very weak move that I'm sacrificing a move slot for is actually useful in this scenario, and that's partially countering the meta, but it's a gimmick, and it worked for me there. Like, you can do all kinds of stuff like this and really bring it to a tournament. It's not just for like messing around on the ladder.
Yeah, I remember that was legit. I like that team you brought. That was fun. I used that Thundurus like that said. I used that thing a lot after that.
It was good.
It definitely is a matter of expecting it, right? Like maybe I wouldn't bring that to the next tournament, but like I think it's worth bringing to best of 3 events sometimes. Things like that.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. If you can slot in a different coverage move, some form of utility, like it's not the typical, but you're trying to boost your percentage to win. That's about everything VGC is trying to, what gives you the best percentage? Because we look at percentages all the time. We talked about that, I think, on the last one with move accuracy. Like, we look for these little percentages, and even like, way we look at damage rolls, we look at percentages. You can have a low roll, high roll.
The game's all about probability.
Yep.
You'll have players make moves that don't make sense, but when you look at them like through the lens of some actual math and statistics, which terrible video game. I don't want to do that. You'll see like this was their best chance. Even it was 30% odds to win the game, better than zero.
That's better than zero. It's better. So if you go for it, like going for a triple protect. I mean, if it can win you the game, it can win you the game.
Sheldon beat me in the league. The first league we ever played, he won on a triple protect. There was a 1% chance.
Really?
But he clicked it and it worked. And I wasn't even mad at him. I was mad at the universe a little bit.
Yeah, mad at RNG.
Yeah. So there's one concept we haven't talked about at all yet that I think we should, because it's pretty central to team building. And I think we're getting into the weeds a bit. Is speed control, and we've talked about speed a lot, but I think speed control is a really crucial thing that matters when you build your team. So if you recall from the last episode or just from playing Pokemon, speed is what determines who goes first in the game, right? And that's absolutely massive. It doesn't matter how strong you are if your opponent can just go first and kill you. You generally build a team around the concept of I either want to be fast enough to beat my opponent before they can beat me, or I want to be bulky enough that I don't care if I get hit. Or third option, I want to base my team around a move called Trick Room, which makes slow Pokemon go first, which is a whole separate category, but it's such a powerful effect that you just kind of have to consider it at all times.
Yeah, I was going to say, to answer your question earlier, Rowan, my favorite sort of strategy / gimmick, whatever, for building a team is normally hyper offensive. Right, I like to have it's so basic. I'm not gonna sugarcoat that. It's so basic.
It works.
It does work, and it works super well in Sword and Shield. I think this is some of the most hyper offensive that VGC has been in a while, according to people who've been here longer than me. Just because Dynamax allowed that, and a lot of the stuff that came in to VGC with Gen 8 allowed it too. But one of the things I like to do on the note of speed control is to have, normally I lead with something that'll do big damage, and then something that'll make it go faster, right? So I mentioned Whimsicott and Grimmsnarl and Tornadus up in earlier. They have Prankster, which allows them to have, again, the status moves go first, go sooner than they normally would, and then higher priority. Thank you, that's the word. And then you have Tailwind, which doubles your speed. And then you have a Pokemon like, we'll go back to Kyogre, sitting next to it, and then that just does big damage real fast. And that is my favorite strategy.
I don't think we've actually told people what priority is, and it's kind of easy to glaze over.
I was just thinking that. For
our purposes, it just makes things go faster. If you want a little more of an in-depth explanation, every move has a priority, which determines, so you have speed, which says who goes first, but beyond that, there are priority brackets, and everything at a higher priority will go before something at a lower priority. But then if they have the same priority, that's where speed comes in. So 99% of moves have no priority, so the fastest Pokemon goes first. But you have things like Quick Attack is probably the thing you're most used to from the game, which has +1 priority. So
it's like Tackle, but it goes first.
Exactly. So a Pokemon with 1 speed with Quick Attack will go before a Pokemon with 200 speed who's using a regular move.
Yep.
But there's brackets that go above that. The move Extreme Speed has +2. The move Fake Out has +3. What's a +4 example?
I don't know. I know Protect is +6.
Helping Hand. Yeah, Helping Hand's
above Fake Out.
Yeah, Helping Hand is 5, Protect is 6, so on. These kinds of things, right? So the move, the Prankster ability we're talking about is super valuable because it makes every single move that doesn't do damage have +1 priority. So you can imagine all kinds of crazy things you can do with that.
And we say +1, but it doesn't sound like a whole lot. But then, like we said, 99% of moves are in 0, right? Exactly. So that does make a huge difference, even though it is just +1. But anyway, so moves like Tailwind, which doubles your speed, has a +1 priority, so you can guarantee you get that off before your fast whale next to you, Kyogre, does something big damage to the team. So that's been
dynamic speed changed a lot of that too.
Oh, good point.
Gen 8.
Yeah, so
Dynamics made the huge, because before Gen 8 you would set Tailwind, but you would still move at the, like you were locked into your speed.
Yep.
Yeah.
On that turn.
The turn order was determined before the turn started.
Yes,
so yeah,
exactly.
Your Tailwind would only take effect the following turn.
On the next turn. Yeah. So Prankster Tailwind wasn't prevalent really.
Viable,
like
really.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah,
as
you
viable,
would
I
want
guess.
It's nice. You guarantee it happens.
Yeah, but a lot of people would go slower tailwinds because, something bulkier, like Lunala used to have, you'd run tailwind on that or something.
Or Suicune, or exactly. Yeah.
Yep.
And then the reverse of that, another prevalent thing that's been in Sword and Shield is Grimmsnarl. It also has Prankster, and it has access to the move Thunder Wave, which will paralyze. And then, if you remember from last episode, third? I don't remember from last episode. How much? Half your speed.
I think if you go back, if you go back enough generations, it was a quarter.
Okay,
it was brutal.
But yeah, so it has the speed.
It has scary face as well.
Right, which cuts your speed by 2.
It's also halved, but it's in terms of stat drops instead of through a condition.
Yep.
So you have options there for other things for speed control, right? So speed control is either going to be ideally lowering your opponent's speed or increasing your speed so that you go first. Or does someone want to talk about Trick Room? Because I hate Trick Room.
I love Trick Room.
All right, go for it.
I know I said Colossal was one of my favorite strategies too, but my other is probably Trick Room. And when we're talking about strategies and all, you go first, you want to knock out your opponents. Well, a lot of times too, it's a just as good thing to be bulky, be able to take a hit. You might be slower, but what Trick Room is, it's the lowest priority move in the game.
Minus
so it's always
-6.
Yep, and it's always going to go last when you set it up. But what it does is it reverses the turn order. So the slowest mon is going to go first on the next turn.
That is incredibly powerful.
Yes.
It does not flip priorities though. Priorities always stay the same.
Stay just speeds.
Yes.
So in your priority bracket. But yeah, like I said, I guess the way to think of it is it's the turn order is flipped.
Yeah, just lower speeds become better. And
exactly.
That's really the reason that's so powerful is that you're turning your opponent's investment against them.
Yep.
Yes.
Speed is something you have to invest into. We still haven't gotten into IVs and EVs, which I guess technically could go into team building, but that's again a whole topic. We're
gonna run out of time for this episode for that. I think.
Yeah, I think that's literally worth like a solid half episode.
There'll be a math episode later.
Yeah, your Pokemon have a limited number of points to work with to invest in, and speed is one of the things you can invest in. Trick Room makes that speed bad. So you can imagine, like, not only are you getting to go first, you are making it so your opponent has points that did nothing, and those points get to go into
actively
your bulk.
hurt it.
Yeah. So you are faster, potentially stronger, and almost certainly bulkier, which is a crazy combination. Like you just get all the upsides.
If you ever look at your typical Trick Room Pokemon, like they typically have higher stats across the board, except for speed.
Yep.
Their speed's usually going to be really low, but they're going to have a lot higher defenses, a lot higher HP, and about the same attacking stats as your faster Pokemon, but they're just super slow.
Yeah, that's another good note we'll talk about in the math and numbers episode. We'll eventually have is how stats are often distributed across Pokemon.
Yes. Yeah, but the Trick Room can be extremely powerful, and sometimes it's even an option to bring if you're not hard. Trick Room, I guess, that's the term whenever you have a team, and that's the whole game plan is to set up Trick Room, and you're gonna do whatever you do in Trick Room.
Yep.
You're gonna try to win in Trick Room, and you don't really have an option to win outside of it, unless you just can take hits.
It's the difference between my whole strategy is to get this up and hit you with really slow, strong Pokemon, and I have this as an option. If I'm clearly slower than you, I'm going to do it, but otherwise I won't, or I'll even have the option to reverse yours if I so choose.
I was going to say reversing Trick Room is also very, very good.
Yeah. Yeah. But hard Trick Room's very much like a hyper offensive style where you have your game plan and you just go for it.
Yeah, so, all your eggs are in that basket, which it's almost a gimmick, honestly. Like it's strong, especially strong with Dynamax. It wasn't quite as powerful before it.
And then the other thing to keep in mind for hard Trick Room, while we're on that topic, is Trick Room lasts for 4 turns, which could be a whole game if you're good.
Well, it's 5 turns, but the first turn you set it counts, right?
Yeah.
It's like because
Yeah. That's fair.
It's the same as Tailwind. It's 5 turns technically, but the first turn counts.
Right.
So actually, you
really only have 4 turns of Trick Room.
You have 4 Trick Room to do what you want to do.
Right.
In it.
And you have to ensure, right? So going back to what we mentioned last episode about leads and having that first turn count a lot for the game, you have to understand how you get Trick Room up and make sure that whatever you have, your strategy can guarantee you get Trick Room up, whether it is you have a follow me, something that's super bulky, and then something can set Trick Room, right? So follow me means that the other 2 Pokemon have to attack that target.
Redirection,
yep. And then you have your other Mon sets Trick Room, and then maybe that other Mon goes down to the 2 attacks, and they can bring in a strong, some Pokemon that's strong in Trick Room, and then hopefully sweep from there. But again, you only have 4 turns to make it happen, which means you kind of have to be hyper offensive once you get Trick Room up. You have to really mow down your opponent's Pokemon.
Yep.
to make it count.
It's not it really isn't an easy strategy to pilot well, I think, especially like against good players, because they know what they have to do against it. Anyone that's played it enough knows their ins and outs of Trick Room, and it's as we talked about team building, that's something you need to build with in mind.
Yep.
Because there's always a possibility of Trick Room going up.
Yeah, so that kind of ties into the anti-meta kind of concept, right? It's not just anti-meta, it's the ability to counter things that exist, which they might be better, they might not be, they might just be things that if someone brought this, I'd lose, right? Yeah. And sometimes those things are so uncommon in the metagame that you don't bother, you just accept that possibility. But generally, a well-rounded team will consider okay, if someone brought this and I lose, can I just bring one move or one Pokemon that will do what it needs to do normally, but also handle this? So a great example, Trick Room. If your team is all hyper offensive, if it's all just fast, speedy Pokemon that maybe they cover their types perfectly, but they just blast things. If you don't manage to kill the Pokemon before it sets Trick Room, you've probably just lost because you have a bunch of glass cannons on your team, right? So maybe you have 5 Pokemon that are hyper offensive, but you bring 1 that can handle it. Examples would be Amoonguss is really, really slow and puts things to sleep. So if they set Trick Room, fine. I have my 1 slow shroom here that will put you to sleep, and that will keep you busy until Trick Room's over, and then I can win. Another example would be there's a move called Imprison, which makes it so that no one can use a move that your Pokemon who used Imprison has. So it's very common to have a Pokemon with both Trick Room and Imprison. Yep. You predict your opponent will set the Trick Room, and then you click Imprison, and they suddenly can't, and then you're free to go ahead and then you're free to go ahead and win the game with your fast stuff while they're stuck with slow stuff that will never get to go first. Yep. So, and that's just an example. I think we mentioned Venusaur and Torkoal earlier. It's very common. Venusaur has access to Sleep Powder. It gets to double its speed in Sun. A fast Sleep Powder is terrifying. It's a really strong strategy. People bring it all the time. So a lot of people will put the item safety goggles on their Pokemon so that they're not affected by Sleep Powder, and they can either kill the Venusaur or use the move Taunt to make it so it can't use Sleep Powder at all, things like that. And you can put these kind of options on your team without really crippling it. You don't have to dedicate yourself to stopping these things. You just have options. Yeah. You always want to have tools to handle everything if you can.
Yep. And it's impossible to cover everything, I think, especially as the Dex expands through the format. So if Scarlet and Violet's going to be anything like Sword and Shield, we're going to get the DLCs and it's going to add things. But with each edition, the meta kind of shrink or,
expands.
Or expands, yeah. So you can't, it becomes impossible to cover every single aspect. You can cover it with leads and gameplay to an extent, I think, more.
It goes back to the odds thing, right?
Yes.
We keep saying this is a game of odds, of chance, of gambling, whatever. You're really trying to minimize your odds of losing and increase your chances of winning.
Yes.
That turn -1 is another place where statistics come into play, and it's not a literal dice roll done by the game, but it is, what are the odds that I'm going to run into the one thing that can beat me? If they're really low, if no one plays that one thing, then
sometimes
maybe
you
it's
take
fine.
a chance.
Maybe you run that.
And that's part of knowing what that current meta is, right?
And especially if it's something too that has a real bad matchup into the rest of the meta or something. You know, it could be something like that where the thing that counters you just doesn't do well in the rest of. So, you know, if they would do it all right in a tournament, they played nothing but your team,
right?
But they, you know, that's not odds for them either.
I think there's a really good example in Series 12. Yveltal Groudon was an archetype that was considered pretty strong, but and Joe UX9, I think it was his favorite, at least for a while. And it's the one big weakness it had, which was bizarre, but its big weakness was Kyurem White, which is an incredibly powerful ice type. So of course it hit on the special side. So it murders Groudon. It hits Yveltal really hard too, even though Yveltal has okay special defenses. And like, but no one brings Kyurem White, or very few people bring Kyurem White, because the mon that defined the metagame was Zacian, who
and it does not like
who would outspeed it and kill it in one hit.
Yep.
And there are definitely ways to make your Kyurem White handle a Zacian, but it's just, why would you choose the one Pokemon that hard loses to the most used restricted in the format? But of course, Joe had the bad luck to go up against a Kyurem White in like multiple tournaments when he brought Yveldon. It's just one of those things. Like, are you going to take that gamble? You do lose that rock paper scissors, and you can beat them if you play better than them, but it's really hard. Your odds are low.
Yeah, but I think this is a kind of a truism across all competitive gaming, especially anything like this, because to me, VGC is very similar to any like trading card game. So, you know, the Pokemon TCG, even Magic the Gathering, Yu-Gi-Oh, any of those that you play, it's very similar. Like, team building and deck building are very similar things. You're looking at the same aspects. So, like I said, because if you go to a tournament and you're thinking, okay, maybe if I bring this, it gives me the edge on what's popular. And that's what we're looking at.
Yep.
When we're talking about anti-meta, you know, kind of gaming the tournament is other term for it.
Yeah.
But it's something that will give you a competitive edge.
Yeah. Outside of VGC, I'm more of a fighting game guy, but even in an execution-based games like fighting games, this still happens, right? The way that people rank fighting game characters, is by their what they call the matchup spread. It's how many characters in this game do they do positively into, and they might hard lose to a number of characters, but if they beat 95% of the cast, like most of the time, then that's a top tier character. You are not doing a bad thing by investing a bunch of time into learning that.
Yep.
And then you either just have to learn to be way better than the people who are playing the last 5% of the cast, or you just
hope you don't see it,
or you're just banking on them not coming, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
And to, again, we've been talking in broad strokes about team building this whole time. It comes down to you have to, unfortunately, just have to play the game, right?
Yeah.
You got to play the game. You got to play the meta. You have to understand what's being played. You have to, have that time investment outside of listening to your favorite podcast, to really get a hold of what's being done, by the community at large.
Yeah. I think we can go through I had a little example in mind for like how you might start building a team. Like one of the most iconic teams of Gen 8 was Wolfie's Colossal team that he won Players Cup 2 with. And it exemplifies a lot of the things we were talking about during this episode. So he almost certainly started with the gimmick of Colossal, and then he had two things that could activate what Sheldon mentioned earlier. He had a Dragapult, which was a defensive support that could surf and set it off. He had an Urshifu that could use Aqua Jet to hit it with priority and set it off. And then, you have your core, your big offensive things. He rounded that out with a Rillaboom and an Incineroar. That's a grass and a fire type. It makes a fire, water, grass core with his Urshifu. And he has the Dragapult as a support. He only needs one more, and he throws in a Moltres Galar because it covers the remaining weaknesses on the team, and it's a second Dynamax option. And all of a sudden, you have 6 Pokemon that work pretty well together. And there's a million other things beyond that. You still have to choose your items. You have to choose how to invest your stats. You have to choose all the moves for them. And he had little things here and there to account for all of this. But it's not too bad to I would personally advise that people just take a rental and go in if you want to start winning off the bat.
Definitely.
But put 6 Pokemon together, make sure that they don't all share weaknesses, make sure you have a game plan, and then see where to go. And when you inevitably you will lose at some point with this, right? Especially if you're just starting out, see what you lost to and see what would beat that. And
learning from your losses is one of the most important things too. Yeah, you
more
can't
likely
just
than not, you could change one thing to beat that thing.
Yep.
Right?
Exactly.
And you keep doing that.
And that's one of the things too. I've always noticed, you know, in other Discords and everything else, you get new players and hey, check out my team. You try to give them some advice on it, but I've always found I think it's
feedback.
Probably a little bit more effective method. Like I can give you feedback on saying, yeah, but you know, once you try this instead, or maybe this spread would work better. But what I want to see is go test it first.
Yeah,
and I think that's. Like, take what you have, what you thought was a good idea, and go play 20 games with it.
I was gonna say like
and then come back.
Go build a team, play on Showdown, and then save a bunch of the recordings, especially the recordings where you lost. And then you can review them. You can talk to your friends, talk to your community.
It's all important.
It is correct. Yes, it's fair. But like you can take that and review it with people. Figure out what you did well, figure out what you could have done better, figure out what you lost to, figure out what you did really well against, and then you can make those slight adjustments.
And I'd say 1 loss is more valuable than 10 wins in terms of determining how to get better.
But you know, in best of 1 ladders too, I mean, you can win, but your opponent misplayed, and you know, you can still see like, oh, well, you should have done this because. You know, if your opponent had just played correctly or something.
It would be fun to learn from your opponent's losses.
It would be nice. So that's really what it comes down to, right? Is that you are only able to change what you can do. So like you can win 100 games against people because they all played badly, but when you lose once, there's something you could have done, whether it be team building or playing or choosing your team preview, or maybe just getting luckier, you know. If it turns out that was what you did wrong, then you know, just try it again. But like that 1 loss is so valuable, so like look at it, bring it to people who you might think are more experienced than you, and take feedback, because that's another mistake that people often make, is you get invested in your own decisions and you don't want to necessarily hear that you're wrong. I do it myself. But
nobody likes criticism.
Take criticism, because you know, like you can only get better from it. The worst case scenario is that someone gives you bad advice and then you try it doesn't work, and you don't do it again. Like,
you ignore the bad advice after you find out that it's bad advice.
Yeah, it's hard to determine what is good and bad advice.
I think one of the first things when I first started playing competitive, I think I heard Joe UX9 say it was, you know, every game you shouldn't lose a game. Basically, you know. You typically, there was something you could have done different, and you need to look at your losses that way.
Yeah, that's fair, and that's true. Like I think we can take this to any competitive game too, right? Like you can always learn from your losses. You can always learn what you could have done better, etc., etc. So we've not gone as long as we could have on team building. I do want to kind of close this episode out with a couple of thoughts, right? So if you are brand new to team building, brand new to this game, and you look at it and you're like, oh my goodness, I have to pick 6 Pokemon, each with 4 moves, each with 6 stats, each with a nature and an item. Oh my gosh, it's so many choices. You're right, it is. And I think that goes into the deck building thing that Sheldon was talking about a few minutes ago, where like you have all these different options where you can really fine tune your team to be what you at least hope it would be. But the biggest thing you can do is take a rental, take a team, go out, play it, try it on Showdown. We can do a lot more games in a short amount of time.
Best friend. Showdown is a VGC player's best friend.
And then
you Showdown more than you play the actual game.
Yes.
Picolytics too.
And then I was going to say Picolytics is huge, because Picolytics does a good job of kind of reporting on that meta. Yeah, the meta we kept talking about.
The most used Pokemon, the most used items, the most used moves, the most used EV spreads. So that's just very useful. When we say use what works, I hate to say it, go on Picolytics, look at the first 6 Pokemon that are on the list.
Those are working.
Most likely they form a team that you can use. And that's not a bad place to start, especially if you're starting to play once the meta has already kind of started off.
And they've also, on Picolytics, they've built, and I think they've continued to upgrade their team builder. So it kind of helps if you wanted to use that as a starting point. Go play around on that and get ideas. I think
your practice is Showdown though. That's where you practice.
Agreed.
Absolutely.
It'll help you iterate quickly.
And I think another good thing about team building and the meta is that it changes with the series that you're in, right? And I'm going to sign us up, you two. I want to sign us up for a team building video when Scarlet and Violet come out. We'll do something for that
be really good
early season.
Actually do it, not just talk about the abstract concepts.
Yeah, we need to show. Yeah, because I don't think any of us feel like building a Smite Myth team or a Series 13 team right now for
absolutely not. No. So
my brain is not there.
Scarlet Violet Series 1, we'll build a team for y'all. Any other closing remarks on this?
I don't think so. Everything else is kind of not related to team building, so we'll catch you on next episode for that.
Yeah, and I think team building too, that's where you're going to find out who you are as a player too. That's a big part of it. There's like how, we talked about, using your favorite style, but it's also your play style. That's also a very like personal thing. I
think we said in the last episode that there's an art to it, right?
It is.
And this is where it starts to shine.
And you need to find your strokes and, what brushes you like kind of thing,
Yep. I think that about does it.
Yep.
All right. Well then, what fun stuff do we have going on? There's only a few more weeks, it feels like, until Scarlet and Violet, where I will be at least streaming all weekend that game. So come find me on Twitch. Rowan, you said you have a video coming up soon.
Yep, I will be releasing it hopefully before this one airs. So, keep an eye out for the first half of my Malamar season. And
Sheldon, I don't believe you because I don't believe you stream.
Nope. But I will.
Okay.
But I will again. No.
Hold you to it.
Definitely. Yeah, come Scarlet and Violet. I'm going to be trying to go hard as much as I can. Like maybe I'll bring my kid down here and she'll be jumping around and yelling at me while I try to stream.
There you go. I think next week we'll probably talk about some of the news that's come out about Scarlet and Violet. Got a couple of trailers, a couple of fun things from different press sources, etc., etc. We'll talk about all that stuff next week. But for right now, I'd like to say thanks to RobKTA and Game Chops. These were our theme song, Goldenrod Game Corner off the Ultraball album. One of these weeks, I'll get that right the first try. I've been Harrison. You can find me on Twitch and Twitter at Ixen. And as always, I've been joined by
Rowan. You can find me on Twitter, Rowan W. Hall, YouTube, just Rowan Hall.
And this is Sheldon. You can find me on Twitter at Captain_Unova, and you'll find me on Twitch again at Captain Unova at some point.
Sure we will.
Scarlet and Violet. Come Scarlet and Violet.
And midnight. Are you going to stream midnight? All right, we'll hold you to that.
I might.
And together, we have been the Game Corner. You can find us on Twitter at Game Corner VGC. You can find us in Discord and link below. Don't forget to try and convince me to make stupid videos from what I said in the last episode. There hasn't been enough engagement yet, so I'm off the hook. But until then,
I didn't make all my fake accounts.
Oh yeah, I gotta make more. Until next time, y'all, press start and game on. Bye.